just having that shingle at the door on the wall that says Palestine Museum. It's a big fight against erasure. We want people to walk out of the museum understanding that we are here to stay and we're not going anywhere and we want to return to Palestine. I have a handwritten map of my village, which shows where my father's land was. It's in a book now. I want that land back. And we do have a claim against the Israelis for holding and stealing that land.
Today, we speak to a man who has built a museum not for a state, but for a people. Faisal Saleh is the founder and executive director of the Palestine Museum, which first opened as Palestine Museum US in Woodbridge, Connecticut, and has since traveled across the Atlantic. The first European branch of the Palestine Museum opened in the Scottish capital Edinburgh in May, as Palestinians marked the 77th anniversary of the Nakba. Born to refugee parents forced out in 1948, Faisal's journey spans continents and disciplines, from business to art. His mission? To center Palestinian artists and to protect and project Palestinian art and identity in all its complexity. Faisal, good morning.
Good morning to you.
First things first, you claim to be from Palestine. Now, you must know, as Netanyahu's son and numerous Israelis on Twitter have pointed out time and again, there is no letter P in Arabic. How can Palestine exist? How do you even say Palestine in Arabic?
Well, Palestine is Falastin in Arabic.
And with that, welcome to Falastin, the podcast where we talk all things Palestine. I'm your host, Jehan, and I've teamed up with Faisal and the Palestine Museum to bring you the voices and journeys of Palestinians and their allies. Right, Faisal, let's begin right at the beginning. Tell us about your family's origins in Palestine, where you're from, and what circumstances led you to the United States.
Well, I come from a family that's originally from the village of Selama, which is about 5 kilometers east of Jaffa in English. In 1948, my family were displaced. They became refugees. At the time, my parents had 9 children with them. And their first stop was a village called Silat al-Dhahr, which is near Nablus. There, my mother delivered another child who was my sister, the sister who was just older than me. And eventually, after 6 months staying with some in-laws we had there, they ended up in Al Bira, Ramallah area, where I was born 3 years later. So I grew up in the West Bank in the Al Bira, Ramallah area, attended public schools there. And after completing the 11th grade, I came to the United States in 1969 to finish high school and go to college there. I was lucky enough to have a scholarship from a Quaker school called the George School outside of Philadelphia in Newtown, Pennsylvania. And later, I obtained financial aid also from Oberlin College in Ohio. And after that, I was able to get residency since I had a couple other brothers in the US and began working in business in 1974. I should point out that I arrived in the US in 1969. It was a momentous year in America. It's the year Nixon resigned. It's the year of Woodstock and the year the Americans landed on the moon. Actually, let me correct that. Nixon resigned in 1974. That's the year I graduated from college. Apologize for that. So I began a long career in business. Initially, I had a few jobs working for corporations. I wasn't satisfied with the level of opportunities and the freedom to work. And I ended up leaving and starting a business on my own. And after a couple of false starts, I was able to create a very significant business, and it was very successful. And in 2010, that business was acquired by a major corporation. And after that, I began to look for things to do. I had not done anything for Palestine during the about 40 some years when I was working in business because, for one thing, I didn't really have much time as I was preoccupied with the work. And also, I didn't really come across any compelling opportunities to do something. I didn't want to just do anything. I wanted to do something very meaningful and impactful. And a few years after selling the business, I got involved with the idea of creating a Palestinian museum. I was with a group that I wasn't happy working with, and I ended up splitting and creating the first Palestinian museum in the Western Hemisphere on April 18th, 20, I'm sorry, on April 22nd, 2018, was the opening of the Palestine Museum US in Woodbridge, Connecticut.
What was the turning point that made you think of art specifically? I mean, your background was in business, so why art?
Well, I had some other ideas that they weren't turn out not to be quite practical and feasible. My first endeavor was to create a tennis club in the West Bank to train Palestinian young athletes in the sports of tennis and to bring him to international tournaments around the world, such as Wimbledon, the French Open, the Australian Open, etc. But that dream did not materialize as I explored the practicality of creating such a tennis academy on the West Bank and all the corruption that takes place there and the lack of independence. That academy would have been doomed from day one. And I abandoned that idea. And just by coincidence, I was invited to join a group of people who were trying to create a museum for quite some time. And I worked with them for a while. And I was not very impressed by the visions they have and the approach and how it was going.
Hmm.
And I wanted to do something really big with a lot of vision. So I found it necessary to split off and go it alone. And that's what happened. That's how I got into the art. The only art I really was very familiar with it initially was the art of photography, as I was taking photographs since I was 10 years old. Somehow, one of my brothers on a vacation trip to Ramallah from Kuwait, where they used to work, as many Palestinians did at the time. He brought me a $4 camera that he bought that was made in Hong Kong, and I used that camera for like 30 years until it was stolen when our house was broken into in one time, and eventually I had to upgrade to better cameras and more interesting types of photography.
What was your vision though? You were talking about you had bigger vision for the Palestine Museum. What was your original vision behind the Palestine Museum US? Who did you build it for and what did you hope it would do?
Well, the vision for the museum really is to create an environment or an entity that tells the Palestinian story to a global audience through the arts. I felt that political wrangling were not very effective in reaching people and explaining our story to the world, and I thought that art was a much more effective medium. Art speaks to the heart. It creates emotions among people when they watch a good piece of art that resonates with them and talks to them. And there's nothing more effective than that in terms of it could be music also, of course, although I really had no preparation in music and no exposure to the science of playing music or learning music because we grew up in such poverty in the West Bank that we could not afford to go to private schools that had music lessons. So the only music we can get to is listening to music on the transistor radios that we had, and the listening to Kulthum and Fairuz and Sabah and Shah and all these people. So we were very avid and expert listeners, but we never had opportunities to play music and do that. So the music was not really something I could really do anything with at the time. The art was a bit easier and was more manageable as an enterprise.
I mean, you're right that art connects, or people can connect to art better than politics, but surely you must see the arts as a political act.
Well, it is. It is. You cannot separate art from the reality of the world, and the reality of the world that Palestinians live in has been political. It has been involving a lot of injustice and losses and anguish, and you really need art to express those feelings and to express how things happen like that.
Um, I'm interested to know what your earliest kind of collection was. So when you started the museum, what did you start with? And do you have a permanent collection, or how do you create the work that you display, whether in the museum or in galleries and exhibitions?
Yeah, well, when I decided to create the museum and plan the opening of the museum, I was very sensitive to the fact that we had had a museum, a Palestinian museum that opened without any artwork in it, which was a very embarrassing thing that happened, a few years earlier. And, sometimes in the Middle East, people think of an institution as the building of the institution. Like when you build a university building, you have a university. And notwithstanding the fact that you need faculty in there and you need programs and things. And the same with museums. The building of the museum is not a museum.
Mm.
It's just a building. It's what's inside the building that becomes the museum. And I was so keenly aware of that, and I did not want to repeat what happened because that was not something we are proud of. At any rate, so I began contacting Palestinian artists through the internet or through whatever means I could find. And I explained my vision to them that we're creating a museum and it's going to be like this, and that. And I've asked them if they would like to have some of their work exhibited. And initially, a lot of the artists were very hesitant and did not really want to get involved. And they say, well, talk to us in a couple of years once, see how this thing goes. I've invited some well-known people to be on the board of the museum, and they also apologize and says, check with us in a year or two. And people were not willing to commit to things they didn't know anything about. And I certainly do not blame any of these people. I think it's only natural for people. I eventually got to know Samia Halabi in New York, and I talked to her and said, "Look, this is what I'm doing and all that." Da, da, da. She says, "Well, I would consider lending you some artwork, but I want to see first what you're doing." So she came to Connecticut actually. I wanted to see the museum, and I showed her everything that's there. And she wanted to make sure I'm not going to be exhibiting artwork from Israelis and stuff like that. I said, no, no, that'll be the last thing I would do. And once she was convinced, like I was a true Palestinian, and she saw the plans I had and the space that I've created, she was content, and she gave us three pieces of art to exhibit for a period of time. And that really was a turning point. It made it easier for me to go to other artists and say, hey, by the way, Samia Halabi is exhibiting some work there. Would you like to be part of the museum? And at that point, it was not much of I did not need to sell anybody on the idea. The idea kind of sold itself, and we've had quite a bit of participants, and we had close to like 50 or 60 artists participating day one. And in addition, we had hundreds of historic photographs that I've located in archives and was able to reproduce them in black and white photography. And these are all pre-1948 photographs.
Mm.
We had sculptures, we had some installation work, and we held a magnificent ceremony that had music, and Debka and Samia Halabi was the keynote for
Yeah.
the ceremony. We had name tags and food, and uh, it was a fantastic opening for the museum.
Since then, how do you choose what to exhibit? What's the criteria for the stories and the artists and the art that makes it onto your walls?
It's really a curation process, and the question, how do I curate exhibits? If you're curating work for a museum, it's a little bit different than curating work for a particular exhibit. So when I curated the initial artwork for the museum, I had to be very thoughtful in terms of diversity and presenting a cross section of Palestinian artists. My approach usually is I don't want to fill up the house with the top two or three artists, even though, I won't have trouble doing that. The idea is we want to present a cross section of the art establishment, the Palestinian art establishment. And we want to also give emerging artists and young artists opportunities uh, to access the platforms, especially international platforms, and to have their work exhibited there, even though their work is not necessarily at the same level as the top two or three artists that exist. And because we wanted to encourage the young artists and also to give opportunity to people who did not have that opportunity, even though they were qualified to have their work exhibited in the past. Just that the cliques and the groups of artists that would work together regularly all the time was not conducive for some people to break into these circles, and I was trying to create avenues for these people to have access to the markets. Now, that did not set well with some people, and they've uh, pointed to me as somebody that doesn't know how to select art and things like that. On the contrary, I thought I was really good at selecting the art. It just people didn't like the artists that I selected, and I thought a lot of these artists deserved to be seen, and because their work was original and they had their own styles. Yeah, yes, their artwork is not being bought and sold for thousands and thousands of dollars, but they were very creative. They represented the true Palestinian artists who's working very hard. They have a family to raise. Uh, Art is not the way they make their living because they can't rely on art to make their living. So it was more. There's a lot that goes into which art I select. It's not that simple, and I always tell Palestinian. I'm sorry, I tell people that ask me and journalists is that so curating a Palestinian exhibit is not like curating any other exhibit. We have certain considerations that others don't have, and we have a lot of things that we need to think about when we do that. And one of the things I've kind of pioneered is putting a map on the floor of an exhibit. That's a no-no from an artistic point of view. It's a no-no from an architectural point of view. And I had some architects that took their name off the project because I wanted to put the Palestine map on the floor. And I said, I'll put my name instead, and we'll see what happens. And it turned out that the map was the highlight of the exhibit and the most, uh, the piece that had the most attention and conversation, and people would come and cry at the map when they put their fingers on their villages,
Mm.
have their photos taken, sent home to their relatives to see. So I really try to be independent in my thinking, and I don't listen to a lot of criticism and a lot of ideas that people try to force on me. And I see these ideas are from other people. We're like Western ideas about how you're supposed to do an exhibit.
Mm.
And I don't think they're suitable for a Palestinian exhibit. So we have our own mission to fulfill, and we have our own artists to serve to serve and to promote. So it puts a lot of responsibilities on our part, but also creates opportunities. Um, for reaching audiences and for giving artists the satisfaction of them and their artwork being seen by the world.
Are there any favorites of yours? I know it must be hard to pick and choose, but are there any pieces that mean something to you
Um,
or artists?
when it comes down to it, every piece means something to me, even the ones that I don't select. Uh, every piece of Palestinian art means something to me. And it's really hard to separate. I mean, there's certainly there are some magnificent pieces. When you look at them, you just want to sit there all day and look at them. There are other pieces that you look at them for 1 minute, and that it gets implanted in your head forever. You know, it, it's art is not the kind of thing where you could say this is good art and this is bad art, or this art is better than that art. It unfortunately it's a much more difficult assessment. It's a much
Very
more
subjective.
what the word nuanced. It's a much more nuanced. I always hesitate to use the word nuanced because it's a word that AI uses every other sentence. Uh, it is a nuanced thing that a lot goes into it. And I've been warned by some people about exhibiting certain works of a particular artist, and I was surprised when I actually went ahead and exhibited that it received a lot more attention than the artwork that was supposed to be just a shoe in the exhibit and no question asked, piece of art in the exhibit. So the audience and the viewers of the art always um, surprise people. Like in Arabic, we have a saying, "المية بتكذب الغطاس." I don't know if you've heard that before.
Yes.
Uh, don't be so sure about anything when it comes to art because you will always be surprised.
Here in the UK, you have been the talk of the town, as they say, after you've opened up a new museum in Edinburgh. How did that come about, and why Scotland?
Well, we wanted to be on the continent to start with. We wanted to have a presence there, and we've kind of experimented a little bit in London. We've had two exhibits at the P21 Gallery. We wanted to have the ability to control how our artwork is going to be presented to people and managed and promoted. So we've looked in London. London is very expensive, and a project there would be risky from a financial point of view. We had the situation in Ireland where the Israeli embassy was closing, and we tried to get our foot in the door there and put an exhibit, put a museum, replace it with a museum. We had a very swift rejection by the people that own the building, who were seemed to be kind of supporters of Israel, and they didn't want anything to do with a Palestinian museum in the building. So they stonewalled us for months. Till now, they still haven't told us if they have any space in the building or not. They still strategizing, as far as I'm concerned. It's the last we heard from them. So we decided to put Dublin aside, and we were encouraged by members of the Palestine Solidarity Group in Scotland to consider coming to Scotland. So I've uh, decided to make a visit and look at a couple of properties, and that was like the middle of February. And the first property I saw uh, was on Dundas Street, and that's the one we ended up with, actually. I really liked it. It had been a gallery until the gallery closed, and it was all set up and ready to go. It did not need any work in terms of modeling or anything. Or the second place was leased by the time I got there, so it was out of the running. And um, the third one, the realtor did not show up. Uh, so we were basically we had one choice, and the choice that we really liked the most. So we decided to go for it. The economics were such that they were really, we felt they're manageable. Um, there were two other interested parties vying for the space also, so we had to get really competitive and get into negotiations with the owners. And my prior business experience came in very handy in that. And we ended up offering a bit more money for this, more than they were asking. And I think that got them really interested. And apparently they needed some money. And so we ended up working a deal for a higher uh, uh, cost than what the asking price was for the lease. And we signed a 5-year lease, and we paid the first year upfront because that was needed in terms of security, since we were from outside and nobody knew us in there. So, but we were happy with the outcome, and we secured the um, best location in Edinburgh. Dundas Street and the particular block we're on is the art address of Edinburgh. And to have the Palestine Museum there, I thought
Mm.
was the ultimate success.
What's the reception been like in the UK in general?
Um, the reception has been fantastic. We get a lot of visitors. We average a little over 100 visitors a day now. The first day we opened, we had 400 people. On a given day, there are 4 or 5 people who cry when they come into the museum. Some of them are Palestinians, but the majority of them are not. They're from Scotland, and they're people that see Palestine and see this, and they think about what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the world, and then they get very emotional.
Mm.
A lot of people come to the museum just to show their love for Palestinians, to show support and empathy with what's going on. And I had to hug some people and have them cry on my shoulder, to comfort them when they were at the museum. I mean, it's just such a feeling to be there. We have 4 children drawings from Operation Cast Lead in Gaza from 2009. and people go there and they melt in front of these drawings. It's like they're so emotion. They get so emotional when they see them. We have a 7 meter long map on the floor, my signature touch. And everybody comes and they're looking for their villages there because that map has all the Palestinian villages that existed in 1948 before Israel destroyed 500 villages and erased them and changed their names. So it's a big thing for Palestinians who were refugees in 48 and their families.
You've referred to yourself as a museum maker. Do you hope to
Yeah,
replicate this model? Are you envisioning more satellite spaces in the future in Europe or elsewhere in the world?
yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing that. That is part of the vision, is when we created the museum in Connecticut, we knew that Connecticut and the town we were in was very small. We did not expect that that be the final
Mm.
chapter of the museum. We thought that was the beginning, creating a solid core for the museum and building the concept, uh, if you will, a proof of concept. And certainly that was successful, although, the audience there is very limited. But we had planned all along to branch it out to major cities in the US and abroad. From day one, that was part of the planning. And we were delayed a bit with the COVID crisis, and that kind of set us back 4 years, basically. And eventually, we got into this mode, and I have developed a model for building new museums, and the model worked flawlessly in Edinburgh, worked very well, and so we have a large number of volunteers involved, close to 50, that man the museum during opening hours. We have 2 shifts a day, and each shift has 2 to 3 people in it. So we are planning on doing a lot of events and taking any canceled events in the area. So anybody that runs it into a cancellation, they're welcome to come and have their event at the museum. It's limited space. We can accommodate 40 or 50 people, but it's a small place with a lot of impact.
What gives you conviction to see this through? I mean, you don't have a state behind you, you don't have massive financial backing behind you. Um, how do you push through and why do you push through?
Well, what I went to college and for 4 years. The only thing I really learned was not to take no for an answer and how to go from there. I worked in business for 40 years and I enforced my conviction that no is not an answer. So I like challenge. I like things that nobody has done before. I like to do things that people say can't be done. And I like that challenge. And Um, I've earned a lot of money working in business, and I do have some financial resources that I've been plowing into the museum, and the museum is fully funded by Palestinian money, and we don't need to cater to any political, religious, or any other kind of currents to create the museum. The biggest problem of creating a museum is the money. That's why there aren't that many Palestinian museums around. But with initial money, you can create the museum,
Mhm.
and then you can generate revenue in terms of donations, revenue from activities and things you sell at the museum and things like that. And then you can make a go of it. And I think being an all volunteer organization makes it a bit more, um, makes it easier to succeed financially with the museum, to make the museum self-sufficient and to be able to stand on its feet. And we're obviously very appreciative to the volunteers, and we owe our success to them. And they are supporting Palestine, and the museum is speaking for Palestine, and that's a great feeling to have the support of people in different countries. And we I intend to use the same model elsewhere, including in the US. We are trying to create a museum in Chicago right now, which is a very big city. And the economics is a bit challenging because the kind of space we want and the location we want is very expensive in a big city like that. But I think we will cross the line and make that happen. I promise people that there will be a museum in Chicago in 12 months. Um, I
You've got a deadline.
I've got to make that happen.
How do you see the museum evolving? Um, with everything that's happening in Palestine and with the escalation. I mean, especially as cultural erasure is becoming more and more systematic, of erasure in general,
It,
Palestinian
it,
erasure, not
yeah,
just
the
culture.
cultural erasure is has been there and it's increasing. But that's why we have the museum. Just having that shingle at the door on the wall that says Palestine Museum in itself, it's a big fight against erasure. Uh, and we think the museum theme and model is very successful, and we just need to continue doing what we're doing and build more museums. Um, and if we do that, we will be accomplishing huge results and a lot of exposure for Palestinians, and we'll be fighting and defeating the erasure that's being subjected to, that we're being subjected to.
And when someone walks out of the museum, whether in Connecticut or in Edinburgh, what is, let's say, the one thing that you would hope will stay with them?
Well, first of all, when they walk out a different person than the person that walked in. There's definitely a change in emotion, a change in attitude, a change in outlook and experience after going through the museum, even if they've just been there like for 15, 20 minutes. Uh, so what we want them to take is, first of all, that Palestinians are human and we have artists just like any other people. We have architects, we have musicians, and we have talent. And the museum surprises a lot of people in the sense that people come in there expecting to see a lot of gory scenes and feet sticking out from the rubble and things like that, and they don't see any of that. They see a lot of bright colors, and they're so amazed. How could you people be so hopeful? How could you have this at a time like this? And we are representing the Palestinian hopes and the Palestinian aspirations for a future of peace and a future of freedom for Palestinians. And we have to show that to people. And we want people to walk out of the museum understanding that we are here to stay and we're not going anywhere. And we are clinging to our hopes and we want to return to Palestine sooner
On that
than later.
note, do you feel like you will be returning to Salama ever?
Um, I don't know if but others might or others will. sooner or later, what's going on there is going to end, and the Palestinians will be given freedom. Uh, and how that happens, the shape of it, nobody knows really. But you cannot keep several million people down under apartheid, and you cannot perpetuate the injustice that has taken place. And um, we had our homeland stolen in broad daylight. Uh, each Palestinian family who were refugees had their land taken away from them. And that will not stand, and that should not stand. And I have a handwritten map of my village, which shows where my father's land was. And it's in a book now. So I want that land back. And we do have a claim against the Israelis for holding and stealing that land. That's grand theft in broad daylight, and it is the West and the Western countries are complicit in that theft, and we intend to hold them accountable.
You know, it obviously being born to Palestinians, you're always aware of what happened in 1948, but we didn't live it, the younger people. We weren't there at the time. And now with everything that's happening in Gaza, I think for the first time ever, I kind of felt that like real fear that because I'm from Gaza and obviously my family home is in Gaza and my family is there and our house was bombed. To begin with, we were sad about losing the actual house, everything that, our memories,
Yeah,
everything in the house. And now, I think for the first time with everything that's been happening, there's this real fear that will not just the house, but the land, will that be taken away? Am I going to never be able to return and visit and rebuild that
yeah,
house? Will there be Israeli settlers there? And it's very difficult to describe that in words. Really, that
yeah.
feeling of your
Mhm.
house is just simply taken away. Your land is simply taken away and you're just kicked out.
Yeah. And that's what happened in 48. I mean, our families, our parents, I mean, you could never imagine the degree of anguish they had. They just
Yeah.
unimaginable, and they didn't talk about it because they just couldn't. Um, and what Israel did in 48 is even worse than what they're doing now. You realize how bad what they're doing now. Like we just showed a film last week. It's like a 9-minute film about the Lid, the town of Lid in Palestine, where this is after Israel was created and was officially a state. Uh, and they were continuing the ethnic cleansing of a lot of the areas that they were interested in. And Lid was a very strategic town
Mm.
on the road between Jerusalem and Jaffa. And so when they came in with their forces and armored vehicles and things like that, they rounded up the men, they put them in the mosque, and they they shot 350 of them to death in cold blood. Uh, and they ordered everybody out
Mm.
and they made them march into the mountains to Ramallah in the middle of July, where the temperatures were soaring. They shut up all the cans of water that people tried to take with them. Nobody was allowed to take any food and water. They stripped everyone of their valuables and jewelry and some of their clothes and shoes
Mm.
and belts and whatever, uh, which was like a robbery basically. Um, and very little was able to get through that, and they forced people to march in in the heat, in the mountains, without any support, without any food, no ambulances, of course, back then, nothing. People died from the heat. People left their children behind because they couldn't carry them anymore. I talked to some woman who told me that she was one of those children. Some other family came and picked her up. Um, so that's what Israel was built on. That's in their early days when the state was only like 2, 3 months old. And none of that has changed. What they're doing in Gaza is simply an extension of that cruelty and black-heartedness. Uh, how could anybody do that to people? Uh,
It's very difficult when we witness everything that's happening to remain hopeful, but I feel like we are cursed with hope, aren't we,
yeah,
Palestinians? So we must keep going. And I think with the Palestine Museum, it's important to showcase that kind of hope and the desire to cling on to life and to
yeah.
beauty and everything that art entails, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. I mean, this kind of conversation really is very emotional, and you can't really talk about things like this academically. It's hard. It's involved family and people and people's lives,
Yeah.
and whether it's Gaza or Lydda or whether it's Deir Yassin or Tantura, and these are all places where human rights human rights were trampled, and the worst kind of violence was inflicted among Palestinians at Palestinians on Palestinians. Um, all that simply because uh, somebody wanted to create a national home for Jewish people from around the world who were persecuted by other countries. Well, the Palestinians had nothing to do with that persecution. Why should they be paying the price of that? Why wouldn't Germany take the Jewish people and give them a part of Germany to make up for their sins instead of inflicting a lot of crimes and sins and injustice on the Palestinians, in addition to what they inflicted on the Jewish people in the 1940s. Um, this does not make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, we're we've just started this new project together, haven't we? The Gaza Genocide Tapestry, but I think that's a conversation for another time.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Faisal, for
Yeah.
a heartfelt conversation, and thank you to everyone else for listening.
Thank you. My pleasure.
لأني ولدت فلسطينيا لأن جذوري في عمق الدهور لأني ولدت عربيا وأني في القدس من فجر العصور أموت كل يوم أموت كل يوم القدس لنا دوما القدس لن تموت